Hello, hello, hello.
Aloha.
Oh,
Hello.
no, dude, I was literally gonna say aloha too, and I was like, man, that's gonna make me sound a little.
Well, I was going to say hola as
Thank you
well,
for
but
thank you for saying it for me. I wasn't, you just took the words right out of my mind.
I got you.
Hi guys, my name is Consola or Sola for short, and this is my friend Madison.
Hello.
And today we're just going to have a conversation. We're going to kind of be interviewing each other about like the new age exodus. And so let's kind of just get into how we met. How did we meet,
Because I
Madison?
don't even know that people will know exactly what we mean by that, but you know, we'll have to go through what New Age even is because
Oh,
it's
yeah, yeah.
an arena of a lot of things. But how we met.
Yes.
We met at a breath workshop. Because we were, interested, or at least I was interested in trying all these different healing modalities because I've been pretty turmoiled for, pretty much most of my adult life. And I was always searching for ways to kind of soothe. And so breath work was one of the things that I was interested and curious exploring. And so I signed up. I had a friend pass on a workshop, and I walked in, I parked my car, and I'm at the front door, and I look over and I see this shining face, this beautiful
Oh my God.
Lord spirit. And then you can go.
Yeah, and the wild thing is, it's like literally we were walking in together. You were like in front of me when we were walking in. So, and then we sat next to each other, and one of our first introductions was like eye gazing, and so I'm like eye gazing into Madison. Madison's eye gazing, eye
Which
gazing, eye gazing into me.
which
And
would always be so awkward. You could get paired with someone that you don't have this like instant deep
I
connection with.
know, I
And that's
know,
like, how long is this exercise gonna
I
last?
know. You're like looking to the corner, you're like, okay. But Matt and I, we're just like, we just start crying. We just start crying. You know what I mean? And some people call that a trauma bond, but I call it.
I don't think it was. So
We
I think it
we
was
just
more just
yeah.
sisters
I mean,
that like
honestly,
came into contact with each other and realized like,
yeah.
oh, this is a bond. This is like a connection that's sweet. Like it didn't feel like, oh, we're both two sad girls and now we're gonna like.
No, but the crazy thing is like one thing I've been thinking about this throughout the year. This is like the 1 year we've been friends for now, like 1 year. This is like 1 year ago we went to this workshops, which is so
Anniversary date.
crazy. But like one thing Madison and I both share, we both, lived in Los Angeles, went through the Hollywood experience, me in music, Madison in acting and modeling. And so there's something about people who lived in that city, you know what I mean, and have gone through that process. I don't know. For me, I can always see it in a person's eyes. It's a really intense experience to put a child of God through, or anyone through, just someone to go through the process of being rejected, or always feeling like you have to prove yourself. So honestly, what even led me to
Or
going
give
to that.
something to someone or get something,
Exactly.
it's always this transactional thing going on with everybody,
Yeah.
it's not just, only women. I think there's just this really weird dynamic
Yeah.
all the time in those environments, and it's really hard to explain that to people who
Yeah.
who haven't,
Yeah.
you know
Definitely. So this is New Age Exodus and the Hollywood Exodus simultaneously
yeah.
coming to the surface. But I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because I grew up in the faith, and Madison also grew up in your faith. So what was that experience like when you did make that transition, growing up in your faith and going to the city of Los Angeles? Like,
My childhood religion that I was around was a form of Christianity, but there's a lot of conflicting thing. It was Mormonism, and it was always a little interesting for me how I felt in church. there were certain moments when hymns would be sung that I felt the Holy Spirit. And there were certain stories that would maybe resonate, not from the Book of Mormon, but more from the Bible. And there was obviously a sense of community that was fun, which I think is, it's that like fellowship in church that is quite nice. But there were also a lot of very weird things for me, that didn't seem like it was, that just like the word I would use was like offness. And I would even use that in rooms I was in, in audition rooms or at parties and like there's always just this sense of an offness. And I felt that
And
a lot.
you felt that when you were in LA, it was like quite similar to what you felt in the church.
Yeah. And then what I felt when I was doing all these new age things and these certain ceremonial things, there's always something that just feels a little off. And we both kind of had our own come to Jesus moments, or like come back to a certain type of or maybe to start closing the doors of our soul to certain spiritual things. But that was a big thing, was I was like, something just feels so off.
Yeah.
And you can't quite like put your finger on it, but there's just this offness. And so when I was like a little girl, that I didn't really know how to articulate that. I just I went really with the flow, and I was the youngest child in a family. So I was really good at just blending into environments. I didn't put up a much fight with anything. But then something inherent in my nature, certain gifts that I have were more on the performative skills side. I always loved orating and memorizing movie lines and then getting on the fireplace. So I kind of had the spirit of a performer from the get-go. And that kind of entered, and then I would get scouted. And so by the time I decided that I was going to really pursue the arts and more of a performer's journey, I wasn't thinking about, that religion. I kind of just went, it wasn't even a thought for me, like how important that was going to be to have, as I'm going into literally one of the most brutal industries, right? I was just naive, and I did have certain protections, I think, not just earthly protections. And like, I lived with my older sister. She was very protective, and my mother, of course, is very protective in many ways. And but I definitely had angels.
Oh yeah.
That was like in certain things, because I was so naive.
Oh, straight up.
Moving out into that like predator pond,
Oh, definitely. That's so funny that you mentioned that, because when I think about being in Los Angeles, my faith was not even it wasn't even a thought in my mind. I don't remember asking God for protection. You know what I mean? Like, it's really like going into the belly of the beast blindly, Yeah, that's so interesting that you, from a young age, you already had this sense within yourself of what sin felt like. You know what I mean?
Well, just certain behaviors, and then you get into the new age stuff, and there is no sin in that. It's a very universal, generic religion, and they kind of program sin out of the picture, and then it just becomes shadow, and you have to integrate your shadow. But then, I have very different feelings about that now. These psychoanalysts that turned our sinful nature, which I believe in sin at this point. I think there are aspects of myself that I have a capacity to do those things, and I don't personally want to integrate them into my life. Like, it's something that you just have to be aware of and just say no to, and have restraint, and keep, certain things at the forefront. That's what feels, so even that in itself is interesting, because I was a big Jungian archetype, all those things.
I mean, but that's the thing about, that's the thing about the new age. Like, even for me, my introduction to the new age was when I was living in Los Angeles. I remember I was talking to a friend who's a musician, and he was like, "Have you seen the movie The Secret? Have you seen The Secret, Madison?" He was like, 16, that was my introduction. You know what I mean? I was like maybe 19 at the time. And, when you're watching a movie like that, if you guys haven't seen The Secret, it's when essentially they interview all of these spiritual teachers and healers and all of these things, and they're talking about the law of attraction. And so imagine being, yeah, imagine being like a young, creative, impressionable, innocent mind, and you're like, oh, yes, I want my dreams to come true. Yes, of course, I want to ask the universe. Like the doorway into this world, this realm, I really believe it starts so innocently. You know what I mean? It starts so innocently. So, when I was in Los Angeles, my early memories, because I was there during like my early 20s, 19 years old, that was like my introduction to Los Angeles. It was like I was introduced into the spiritual realm very early on. You know what I mean? And it was all of these people talking about manifestation and, you know what I mean? And like speaking everything to existence and this, and that. And it was just, a lot of it was just rooted in this obsession with materialism, because that's kind of what motivates a lot of people in Los Angeles. It's like material and notoriety, and like, it's all fleshly, like earthbound things. And that was the doorway into what, led me personally to even being in that room that met you that day at that workshop. It was like, once that door was open, I felt like I was living in a completely different world, completely different world.
It's a bit, that was a massive thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it is that, like, I can have all of these things and I can be the one that does it for myself. But I also think
That
it's
right
a
there.
control thing.
Exactly.
I think it's like, oh, I can actually harness and control and manipulate the forces of the universe to reach everything I need for fulfill my destiny. And I can do that all on my own, and I think whether you realize that's what's happening, I think there's something in us that obviously is tempted towards that, because it's
Yeah.
a sense of like stability in the world and control, and like not everything is totally, we have some semblance of control, which you get to, control how you see things, how you handle things, your attitude is in your control. But that definitely hit. That was, I think, my entry into mysticism as well. And
Law of attraction.
The Secret. And I
Yeah.
mean, I was watching, I don't really watch much TV at this point, but I was on, I don't know if it was on Netflix or something else, but they just released a whole movie on it, and it had The Secret as like the logo, and it's
I
with like
know. It's
films with
so
Josh Lucas, and it's like Dare to Dream, and I'm like, there it is. There it
exactly.
is. So it just, now it's even, it's just, that's what initially hit all of that very mainstream, because before that it was kind of just Christian Science
Yeah.
and unity, all of those people who were prosperity Christians, and just,
Yeah.
and that was a huge section as well to cope with all my depressions and my money struggles. That was,
Yeah.
those people are who I turned to for
Yeah.
those moments.
Yeah.
Um,
It
which
was
is
always,
a lot of
it was always turning to this thing, into this thing, into this thing, But I do want to even explore, because it's interesting that like the law of attraction was our introduction to like this new age thing. And for me personally, the one of the most appealing parts of it spoke to like the little girl in me, that like, that little part of me, like, yes, if I dream, and you know what I mean? It speaks to innocence, and that's the part of the new age world that has really been that really hurts my heart when I see it now from this perspective, because it speaks to innocence. It's like it wants to get that part of you that has like this faithful, like faith of a child aspect of you, and just turn it into believing in like an industry, essentially, of like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
all of our movies we watch, it's all been, we were already programmed
Yeah.
to have, to want all of these things by the time we get to adulthood.
Yeah.
And so by the time then that hits and you have to start doing the adult stuff,
Yeah.
you don't get to just fantasize about it anymore and dream about it. You get to actually do it and go out and like play
Yeah.
in the playground, that and see if it works. And it does work for many people, right? They manifest the thing. But
Yeah.
then it's that maintenance loop.
Yeah.
Or when you get the manifestation, it's not what it seemed like it would be, and there's not a fulfillment because it didn't come from, what your higher power would have given you. It's coming from a more of an ego place or a wounded place or somewhere different. And that in itself, I think that's people maybe have to learn that on their own, that not everything you think is going to be great is going to leave you feeling fulfilled or bring you peace like you think it would,
Mm.
or
That's
security,
that's so true.
you
That's
know.
so true. Yeah, I think it's be careful what you wish for because you just might get it.
You just
You
might get
know?
it. You don't know what that comes with, And you and
Yeah.
I, we believe in, a devil, a satanic force, so that there's this like adversarial. This is another thing. I don't think until you reach, unless you're highly sensitive, we are highly sensitive, but I don't think you realize the nature of what they mean by spiritual warfare until you,
Yeah.
reach certain pits of depressions and certain things where you're like, whoa, this is, what, life is supernatural.
Straight
There's
up. Yeah.
so much going on that, but then you have to also, for me, I had that my come to Jesus moment was like, well, what are you opening yourself up to?
That right there.
Dabbling with a lot of things, close the doors a bit.
Yeah.
you know
See, that's it. That would be the caution.
yeah.
If someone was really deep into if you're watching this and you happen to be very deep into the new age, we don't intend to put fear into you whatsoever. But I would say the caution is like to even just begin asking yourself, what doors am I opening up to? That was my, for me, that was like what started waking me up from the new age deception. You know what I mean? I was like, I feel like there's a supernatural world for sure because I'm having all of these supernatural experiences. There's definitely like something's definitely beyond our five senses. Like that's a definite thing. And I remember I used to watch a lot of pick a card readings, and these witches or whatever they want to call themselves, divinationers, I don't know what they call themselves.
Okay.
they'd be like they were like, spirit. I'm like, what spirit are they talking about? They kept saying, spirit, show me what. I'm like, hold on. Can we get some names?
Right.
Can I, can I, can I get a name? What spirit are you talking about? And up until I started really asking myself that question, I just had this assumption that every time people were like spirit, they were talking about God. You know what I mean? So I
Or a
never,
holy presence, a presence that's
exactly,
beneficial to you, that's not
exactly.
malevolent.
Exactly. I didn't realize that when people were using the word spirit, because that was a term I started noticing a lot in a lot of the pick a card readings and stuff, or when I would go to these circles and people were doing these things, summoning these things, they'd be like, spirit, spirit. I'm like, hold on, I don't know, what
What
spirit are
spirit
you?
are we invoking? We
I'm
need
like,
to be clear about this. This
I
is
was
a
like, this
very,
was not in the invitation. I
we also weren't really educated on which spirit to invoke whilst in a ceremony. And why am I in a ceremony invoking spirits all of a sudden? That's where it's like a
do
slippery
dance.
slope, right? It's like, wait, all of a sudden, you didn't,
Yeah,
the sliding into these things is so
yeah,
slight, you don't even realize that all
you
of a sudden
don't.
you're doing really weird shit.
Yeah. I remember I heard this guy give this analogy as like the way that the adversary, I mean, we can call it what do we want to call it? Satan, the adversary, whatever. We'll call it evil
The
forces.
enemy.
The enemy. Oh, I
It's
love that.
enemy. It's the way that it comes at you and the way you feel like you have to be on defense. It's an enemy. There's an
I love using that. That's the best way to describe it. So the enemy, he was saying that the work of the enemy is like he doesn't take an innocent person and dump them in hot water. He just slowly starts turning up the temperature until
that
you don't
fog is
realize
really hot.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
you don't realize your boy. It's like you don't just get thrown into a jacuzzi. Like the pool just starts getting a little hot. You know what I mean? And before you know it, you're just so mentally, emotionally conditioned and dependent on whatever world that you've stepped into that you don't even realize that you're literally in another like how would you even describe it? It's like it feels like another reality almost.
It is. It
Yeah.
is because when I had And this is something that that is very in my heart to,
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to have a conversation about this, is when that moment happens, when you go, whoa, what have I been doing? And what is actually, what am I um choosing and believing and taking part in? Like these things that I'm doing, actually, also, they don't feel like they're actually helping me. If you have a
Mm.
moment of honesty, you're like, or that's what I thought. Um, and once that moment, I don't know what it says in the Bible. It's like the scales get lifted from the eyes or something. When my worldview collapse happened, everything looked different after that.
Yeah.
Nothing looked the same. I didn't have to take a plant medicine. I didn't have to do anything other than have this moment of just, and then it everything looked different. All
Yeah.
these things that at one point I thought were friendly looked demonic,
Yeah.
right? All of a sudden, certain things like empty your mind in a meditation. I was like, a disengaged mind in this world is a false teacher's best friend,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, why am I sitting here emptying my mind? And then I started looking into things, because that's kind of my, that's what I do, is once I get a little open doorway, I just start to go in. And then I started looking
Yeah.
into, all the Eastern philosophies. And I was like, actually, given the type of society I want to live in, world I want to live in, these things that I've been doing actually aren't gonna give me the things that I'm wanting.
Oh,
Certain aspects
definitely.
of relationship with others, it actually is keeping me very isolated, and then justifying my isolation. The human design did that. My astrology chart did that. And not everybody uses those things in that way, but that's another fascinating thing, was that all of these things that were supposed to be tools, these forms of divination to
Yeah.
give you insight, to help you build your world, I guess, they were justifying me isolating myself and withholding myself from certain creations, relationships. And then, I was watching pick a card YouTubes as well, because it was how I coped through a heartache and a heartbreak.
Yeah.
That was a year of binge watching those things. And so if you're out there and you're watching pick a card readings, it's not, there's actually more of you. It's a very odd thing.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
something, it's entrancing, and then you get that, and you're
Definitely.
like, these women, they're intuitive, and I'm tapping into something, and it's like, well, is it good what you're
Yeah.
tapping into? Is it helping?
Definitely. Definitely. And it's the nature of a lot of these modalities and tools, it creates like a sense of addiction and dependency. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like you know what I mean? There was like it's
Yes.
there's like this addictive quality, and it's so hard to explain because that's how sadistic it is. You know, you get people to be so hooked on depending on like these forces and these spirits and these energies, because I really believe like the goal of it is just to keep people away from like
It's siphoning, it's
turning to
leeching
God,
for
you know.
sure.
Yeah.
It is keeping you out, from having thoughts of God. It's keeping you
Completely, because
thinking
it
about a million
keeps
other
you in
things.
that loop state, you know.
Your
You're just
twin
going
flame.
in. The crazy thing, when I was deep into the new age, it was like weird. I'm like, I'm having all of these epiphanies, and I felt like I'm learning all of this knowledge, and I'm like, whoa. Like in the beginning, when I really started stepping into the enlightenment path, like, oof, Lord forgive me, when I was like on this path where I was like, okay, I'm gonna be a spiritually enlightened person, and then I'm gonna be a god, because literally that's like it starts again, law of attraction, and then one day I'm like, I'm gonna be a god. You know what I mean? I'm like, whoa, how did I end up here? But that's like why law of attraction seems very innocent at first, because it's really just like trying to take control of your life. You want to take control of your situations, but behind that layer is actually like you positioning yourself to be like, no, I am God. I get to choose my destiny. I get to choose what I think is best for me. You know what I mean? I don't need to consult with anyone but other spirits that I don't even know. It like creates this weird separation. And every time I go back and read Genesis, it's like I'm like this is literally like the path that I walk. Like Eve is like literally me. Like I have empathy for Eve because I am Eve. Like Eve and me are very similar. You know what I mean? Like in the sense like the adversary, the enemy was like, if you like, you're not gonna die if you eat this. Like, and God is literally like, no, like this leads to death. And it's like, no, 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 you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. You want to be wise, you want to be like a god. And I'm like, that's literally like,
Well, people think literal death, right?
yeah,
They don't
yeah,
think about spiritual death, moral decay, the
yeah.
things, sickness, certain forms of illness and not being well and being off, like I said,
Moral decay.
that's
Moral decay.
that's more so, it can lead to actual physical death, but
Yeah,
I think for the most part it's a spiritual, it's slowly chipping away and making things polluting and corrupting things.
definitely. I agree
And
with that.
I've even felt like because we have very different even relationships with certain spiritual gifts that we might have. Like
Yeah.
you could like borderline channel, and you're like, and I always, it's like I close my eyes and I was doing all these things, but it's just like radio silence. There's like,
Yeah.
there was never any here, like I never had any of that, but I've always had this like sense discernment. So when people would talk to me about Kundalini,
Yeah.
you could say everything you wanted about Kundalini, about how great it is, and I still would just go, feels off, feels something in
Same
me. You can't
here.
convert me. You can't convert
Same
me to that because
here.
something felt
There
off
was
about it.
there was so many things that I was falling for in the new age, but for some reason, anytime someone brought up Kundalini, there was no part of my mind was like, I'm curious, I want to explore that. And I
No,
don't, till this day, I don't know why. I don't know why, but I know so many people uh open themselves to that door because I really believe like people are hungry for control, and anything that can offer you some form of control, whether it is Kundalini or this meditation or this next technique, it's like that. I really feel like that's the intention in the beginning, and then it becomes about power.
I
You
was
know
just
what I
going to
mean?
say it's a power thing actually, because at
Yeah,
some point, if you're spiritual and you're powerful
yeah,
in spirituality, that's cool, right?
yeah,
It's like, oh, she can do this. She's healing. He's doing this. They're epic. And that's like a
yeah.
whole new form of power at this point that now more and more
Power.
people feel like they have.
Yeah,
That's our parents' generation. I mean, hippies were the only ones doing any of this stuff. Now it's so much more mainstream and it's so much more prevalent into even what children, I was watching, some of the things that like my nieces watch, and it's glamorizing witchy things,
yeah,
magical things,
yeah.
and that's just something that now it's like, and I was a person who thought being a witch was cool, and
Oh
witch
my God,
great,
same,
and solstice, let's like use and fun and
same.
pagan and stuff. I'm like
Yeah.
worshiping and doing moon and pouring my blood into my plants, and then this is, sorry, this is what happens, you guys. And then all of a sudden, you have your moment and you go, what was I doing? What
I'm
was I
tell
doing?
that's so, oh my God, Madison, we'll have to do like another conversation based on like the earth stuff, because I feel like you and I can go deep into like the earth stuff. But one thing I'll definitely say is like I agree, because I believe it's trying to appeal, its goal is to take away the children, and both like the spiritual context as us being like children of God, but also like innocence, like children. Because even for me,
And
like when I was
obedience.
when I was growing up, there was three big shows that I loved on Disney Channel. One was That's So Raven, which is a story about a show about a psychic. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Number two was what was the second show that I loved? That's So Raven. I also
Like
really loved
Waverly, wasn't there like
I used to love Wizards of Waverly Place, which is a show about like a witch and wizards and witchcraft, and these are so innocent, and then Hannah Montana, I really loved Hannah Montana, and there's this girl living a double life, and that's literally all of those things were like things I found myself doing in the new age. It was like when I was with my esoteric spiritual friends, and then I would go with my friends I'm like, oh yeah, they're asleep, those people are asleep. It was like living a double life. I was like tapping into all these realms, like studying all of like these psychic mediums. I was practicing witchcraft. I'm like, this is literally everything that was advertised to me when I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
on Disney Channel. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I'm not
and just
thinking
living
it's,
a very straight and narrow, good,
yeah,
obedient, where you're like kind of protect, that's not appealing. Even
yeah,
now for people that are leaving the new age, it's like the Christian worldview and the Christian life, that's fun, that's restrained. It's like, no, it's peaceful
yeah,
and it's full of goodness.
yeah.
Like, and it's so interesting how now that's just like, I know a lot of people, because this is happening right now. There's this like mass crisis of faith, and people, I think if you're really seeing what's going on in the world and in societies and in certain things, you're like having to really get to know what you believe.
Straight
And
up.
differences matter. They
Yeah.
matter because it's going to build your, it is going to build your, it's going to shape your behavior. It's going to really affect, I got in a little bit of a lot of conversations actually get really awkward when you start shifting your beliefs like that. Or
Especially,
like what's happened.
it's one thing to go from new age to like, okay, I'm not going to be spiritual whatsoever.
Mhm.
But the journey from new age to finding Jesus, that's like a completely different conversation
Or in
for
the Bible.
exact. I'm telling you.
The Bible's so loaded for everybody.
I'm telling you. So we had to press pause because I haven't bought the full Zoom Zoom long-term thing. Anyway, we were just talking about Christianity. We're talking about our journeys because yes, this is the new age exodus and it's happening in mass waves around the world. Even when I was out in Europe, like it's so many people are going through it. So many people are going to church, even just looking for something, not saying they're going to church trying to find Jesus, but when you step out of that reality, that realm of like bubble of deception, it's terrifying. It's terrifying.
Overwhelming. It's a lot.
And the crazy thing is like God just works in mysterious ways, like truly mysterious ways. Simultaneously, when I was going deeper into the unveiling, that was also when Madison and I were living together during that time period. And I was like, we were both witnessing, we were like witnesses to like us kind of both going through this identity. I don't know what it was. Like, it's so hard. Like, how would you describe, the stepping out of that bubble and stepping into back at home into your faith?
Well, I think when something in your life is not right or things are
Yeah.
off. There's no peace, there's no fulfillment. Things are not operating well. And I think that's happening for the majority of people now, which is why it's such a big deal that um uh everybody has to kind of go through these issues to resolve for themselves and find something that's like very anchoring. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I look back and reflect on all of the different belief systems I've had, because I went through, I think it's very natural when you're a seeker type person and when you're interested, you go through all the avenues. And so I did the kind of new atheist, the four horsemen, and I thought Christopher Hitchens was epic and God is dead. And then that obviously doesn't work because I just see beauty as well everywhere. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm just like, there's just things that don't feel right. And then you go into more, and then I started reading a writer, Robert Anton Wilson, and he had all these like very interesting, stimulating occultic books. And that started to, put me into more mystical um, synchronicity, that it's all kind of a simulation and everything's connected. And then, of course, just plant medicine, psychedelics. Then I started dabbling with things like that. And then kind of worshiping Gaia. That's what happens is this Gaia, this Mother Earth thing takes the place of a God energy. And that kind of, I didn't even realize that that was what was happening, but I was just worshiping more the creation rather than the creator. Um, so all of these things, when I had my that moment and everything, it was like the house of cards fell. And I've told this to you so many different times and people in my life, because it's really hard to explain why you all of a sudden got rid of all your Joseph Campbell books then you're now reading the Bible and people are like, that's radical. You lost your mind. And it's like, no, I feel like I got my mind back.
Oh,
I feel like I got my
the
mind back.
best way to describe it.
I was swimming in myth and
Yeah.
mysticism for as long as I could remember, my entire adult life. And I've never felt anchored ever, like ever, right?
Yeah.
And then I think you also, this is where, faith comes in, is because I didn't know what was happening, why it was happening, but it was undeniable, the intensity of the experience. And it was literally me in a room by myself and feeling like God clapped his hands and went, pay attention, I need you to start seeing things for what they are, not what you think they should be based on what is happening in the world with our culture and our personal experiences. I need you to see to the truth of what things are. And it is a truth that doesn't depend, it's not subjectivism type of truth, right? That's the argument I get in with a lot of people right now, or the challenging conversation, is because you have someone who's like a hermeticism person and they're going all is mind, right? And there is no truth, and like everything is just all, and the Eastern philosophies, it's very different. It's very different from a Judeo-Christian foundation. So that's what I had to do, was that concept of like an absolute truth, like an objective truth.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't matter about my perception, right? I could get sucked off the planet and that truth would still be the same. And it's the same truth that's there for you, that's there for that person, and that person, and that person. And that, at this point, you have so many people that don't believe that that's the case. This is a simulation. We're all just creating, moral relativism, ethical relativism.
Definitely.
Like, that is the thing
and I get it, but it's like, I get it because once you actually admit to yourself that there is an absolute truth, it's like, then you have to actually meet that truth. And most people don't want to meet that truth. You know what I mean? Because it collapses your whole entire world, really, like your whole reality begins to collapse in front of your very eyes. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that, because what got them in that world in the first place was wanting to control everything. And then you step out of it and you're like, everything is out of my control. Everything. That was my experience, because for me, my return back home to my faith, being Christian, it was a series of, honestly, years. Like, I felt God calling me to come back, because I've been in the New Age realm for about 10 years. And I felt God like kind of pulling me to come back for like at least 5 years, not probably in extreme ways, but there was always something, no matter how deep I was in astrology or, basing my whole entire life on the moon cycles or whatever it may be, there was always something about Jesus that just never went away. It was just always something. There was just always something in my spirit. I'm like, but there's something about Jesus. I don't know what it is, something about it. And I really believe, like, God meets us when we're ready. You know what I mean? So we can't force no one can like force your experience into like awakening into, what we believe is like, Jesus Christ is God. But like, he meets you when you're at that point where nothing makes sense anymore in whatever the world that you're in. It's like it's like that whole world starts to deconstruct itself. It like reveals itself to you. All the threads start loosening. Things are just not adding up. You're like, something is off.
Oh, the healing work I do.
Yeah,
all the healing work I do, and that I'm void of peace in every way.
I know, it's like something must, and they get you to be like, no, it's you. You're the one who's off. You're not doing this right. You're not doing
more
this.
Inner child work.
Exactly.
More integration of.
Yeah, exactly.
Go get a consultation. Do a plant medicine combo. I did combo.
Because it's an industry. It's no longer just a realm that we're tapping into, or we don't know what spirits we're playing in. It becomes an industry. And the moment that industry looks like it's collapsing, you'll find another industry taking advantage of those people who are having that view collapse. It keeps you in this perpetual state of wanting you to be empty mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually. It just wants to completely rape you, rip you dry, and steal from you. Like the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Like I get it now. But for me, I remember just things just weren't adding up anymore. I'm like, there's no way I've been like practicing this technique that I've been taught 7 years ago or 6 years ago. I've read this many books, you know what I mean? Like I should be like a master manifester, which in my experience of manifestation, I was good at it. But then after a while, I always found myself back in the same place. I would manifest a bunch of money, and then like, how am I back into the same place? I would like, heal something, and like, how am I back? It would always be like, and you're like on this
Loop is
freaking roller
brutal. The
coaster
looping
ride.
and the repeating of the whatever pattern you've got operating, that's just, whatever situation keep that the way that, same level, new level, same devil.
Yeah,
You think all this time passes and you've resolved something, and then you're faced with the same thing and you're just like, what
yeah,
is happening?
yeah, yeah.
But
And
that's
it's
the case.
and it's crazy. It's because it's like in this world, this new age realm, everyone is so obsessed with like the next thing. That was like the thing that really started lifting the veil from me. I'm like, why do we have to always move on to the next thing? First it's this, and then it's that, then it's shadow work, and then you got to do this, and then you got to integrate, and then you got to do this, and then there's this. It's like it's this never ending cycle that's taking you to nowhere. You know what I mean?
Well,
And
it's so self-absorbed. It's
yeah,
incredibly,
yeah,
like, I think about, and I'm just speaking about me, right?
yeah,
Because I was always diving within to figure out, psychoanalyzing, doing all of the spiritual work within, and one of the main things, and especially one of like Jesus's teachings, was like the best thing in life is to be giving,
yeah,
right? Using the gifts that you've been given, or your purpose, being attached to a purpose, and then you go out and your fulfillment will come from you giving that to your fellow people, to a society, to a culture, to a creative like all of these things. And so you get everybody that's so self-absorbed and psychoanalyzing every little bit of conditioning and trauma and da da da. And they're basically, I don't remember where I heard it, but it's like people making trauma their idol,
oh,
constantly putting it before, right?
yeah,
That like this is, and then you just sit there nitpick. And one of my things was, after my come to Jesus moment, I was so tired of diagnosing every little thing that felt bad or wrong, right? And I was like, I just don't need labels or terms for this anymore. Like, we're going to get back to simplicity. I was like, we're just going to get simple, and I'm going to accept that it might be a little really hard and weird for a bit. Spiritually, I'm going to not know what's going on. I feel like a beginner at praying. I don't know that he's obviously hearing me, but the feedback I get isn't instant. So I'm just going to have to be learning. You're like a boy, you're like a
you're literally
baby,
like
and
a
you're
child,
fresh and
like a
raw.
baby, like a
But there's
baby.
all, it's like there's
Yeah,
nothing else to, it's like, okay, but this just feels, I'm being pulled to this for some reason. And it
yeah,
feels like at the end of this little valley moment, not only is it going to build something in my character, humility, grit to get through something, but it just also feels like it's just, it's necessary. It's like almost necessary for you to go through that little hard moment to get yourself to some sort of, I don't even know what it is, but
yeah. It's perseverance of our hearts, perseverance of our minds. It's to when we wake up and our world views begin to collapse. Like, of course, it's going to be uncomfortable, but I really believe like that's what connects people to God during those periods. Like for me, if I didn't turn to God in the moment where everything was collapsing, I would have turned to a psychiatric ward. I would have turned
another
to like
healer, another
drugs,
session.
vices. It's like God's waiting for us. Like, and this is, we're speaking from our experiences, but like it's like God's waiting for us in those moments. Like for me personally, like I remember when things started collapsing for me at first, like, again, I was talking about, it was a spirit thing. I'm like, why does everyone keep saying spirit, 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 spirit? And I remember Madison and I, we went to a static dance one night. Oh my God, I'll never forget this.
Hated them. I
We
never
went,
enjoyed them.
we went to a
I
static
always
dance.
forced myself to go to these things.
We went to a static dance, and I love dancing. I grew up in a household where we would dance every Sunday. Like, dancing is a huge part of my culture. And I remember, I mean, it was the weirdest experience, you know, and this guy, he's like a shaman, and he's like, I opened the spirits of the East and the West, and then the North, and then he touched the ground, right? He's like, and his voice turned into like a kind of like a weird, I don't want to say demonic, but like, I don't know, his voice changed. It became a lot more sensual and like weird. And he was like, I call on the dark spirit of the whatever, like Mama Gaia, the earth, the transformation. And in that moment, I heard God's voice as audibly as I ever heard it before. I've never heard it this audibly ever in my life. And God was like, say a prayer of protection right now. And in that moment, I don't even remember what I was saying. I was like, I'm protected, I'm covered. Mind you, up until this point, I wasn't praying all the time. I was exploring the idea of like Christianity and Jesus, but I wasn't like where I'm at now, where I'm like, no, I'm a Christian. You know what I mean? But that was the moment where the veil was revealed to me that we're dealing with it's like a dark energy. Up until that point, it was white witchcraft. It was like, yes, there's light, like it's lightness, and there's darkness. It's like light magic and dark magic. There was always this light associated with it, which is why you don't feel like you're doing anything evil. Like people who are doing the tarot decks, like they're beautiful cards with unicorns and dragons on it. It looks innocent.
They're emotionally supportive, and they're helping you with whatever it feels like it's hurting your heart and your spirit.
Exactly. But I remember that was a night where the veil was lifted for me. I was no longer seduced by like pretending like I wasn't seeing what God was actually showing me. Like I was seeing it, and I was like, wow, people are actually really playing with like some dark shit.
Well, and that girl started laughing, and we were like, and we weren't even near each other towards that point, so it's not like we could make eye contact and be like, but we both had the same feeling about like, that's not like a comfortable laughter to hear. That sounds like someone who's possessed by a demon.
Straight up. It
like
was
a possession. It was like, oh, I'm ready to go home. Drink a glass of crisp water, calm down, come back to like some normalcy. Like what just happened?
Yeah,
and we say this like we're sharing these things like, oh, this is just what I've gone through, this is what you've gone through, but we're actually talking to other people that are having many of this as well. That's why. And so someone's like, it's a phenomenon, or I did post one thing on Instagram. I haven't even been able to really interact with social media since that, because the meaning isn't there for me at the moment. Like it just feels like this
it feels soulless. I mean, which is why I love even conversations video format, because it takes me out of all of the other voices. You know what I mean? But I agree with you. What were you saying about the post though?
And a girl, she's probably a little bit of an esoteric Wiccan goddess worshiping, ancient wisdom, maybe light work. We haven't even gotten into the light worker and starseed.
No, we're definitely going to go into that.
That's what I said the first time we met. We looked into each other's eyes, and it's like we thought we were Pleiadian sisters, and that we were, galactic royalty and princess. Like I look back on all of that now, and I was just like, whoa, I was in some serious delusion.
Straight up.
And I'm like, I don't, and that's not also like necessarily a judgment. I feel like when you say these things, like I'll even have certain conversations with like my mom, and she's like, well, that's a judgment, and I'm like, but you have to call it what it is.
So
I was deluded.
Madison and I, we're talking from a place of like, we are both in agreement of an absolute truth, right? Mm-hmm. So when people come together and they're all agreeing in this absolute truth, from our perspective, rooted in this absolute truth, no matter where you're at, from our perspective, it's deception. From our perspective, it's delusion. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Of course, we have compassion for wherever people are at in their journey, but like I think the pure intention for even us coming together and having these conversations is, again, when the enemy is putting you into his bubble, like the water doesn't feel hot right away. And I realize that sometimes there are those moments where people do need that, come on, wake up, you're in some kind of weird fever dream created by
Yeah,
the adversary.
I don't think anybody, when I would go to, talk about the things that I was doing with
Yeah.
certain, it didn't seem like I was doing crazy, Sometimes you do these things hidden just as like a coping thing with your stress, and then like you're kind of just playing with it. Like it didn't ever seem like I was really losing it. Like I still was very sane and functioning, and I was like, oh, because of evolution and consciousness and the precession of the equinoxes, and it's this like vibration, everything that I was saying, you're like, you can see how maybe that could be happening.
Yeah,
But
but it also sounds, the way that you speak about it, the tonality of it sounds appealing.
futuristic,
Yeah, exactly. There's
like
an element.
progress, yeah,
Exactly.
ascension.
Exactly. I mean, it sounds like a really great movie. It really
Yeah.
does. But also from another perspective, when we talk about Jesus and we talk about the Bible, that also sounds like a really great movie. So that's the beautiful thing about this experience that we're having called life. Everything comes back to choice, you know, like that's the gift that one of the gifts that God has given us. It's free will. We didn't have to choose to bow down to Jesus. I mean, we weren't enslaved to bow down to Jesus. We got to choose it. It was
Choice,
something that
what
was a choice,
yeah.
and I think in future conversations, because I think Madison and I are going to have a lot more conversations exploring, definitely diving deep into the Pleiadian stuff. That's definitely something I want to explore. The thing is, like, right now we're in this time period where so many people are waking up, they're waking up, whether if
From
it's
so many different things.
exactly politically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. There's so many different, there's like a mass awakening. And I think COVID really accelerated this, right? But every time that you're awakening to something, it's so easy to slip into another dream of deception again.
Yeah.
It's so easy to, okay, maybe it isn't meditation, maybe it's plant medicine, maybe it isn't plant medicine, maybe it's astrology, maybe there's, you know what I mean? So we come to you guys with this conversation. If you're going through a period where you feel like you're awakening to some kind of deception, something that felt off, like something fell off to you, I mean,
Or the dots
all
aren't connecting, things aren't adding up.
yeah, my greatest piece of advice is just take a step back and try to see things objectively. You don't even have to jump into Jesus right away, or go to church and go for, you know what I mean? That's just where we have felt like, that's felt like the right place for us to turn to. But just take a moment and just look at it. Just look at it plainly, you know what I mean? Objectively, without your own personal experience in whatever you were engaging in, and just see what the new age world is for what it is. That's the greatest piece of advice I can give to anyone who's starting to sense that something may be off, you
Yeah,
know?
and it's not always going to be this like epic thing, and I think that's like one of a channeler that we used to, both and a lot of people, Abraham Hicks,
Yeah.
where it's like your point of attraction is always feeling good, and so you've kind of like programmed yourself to constantly find that better thinking thought, pivot yourself out of that emotion. But I felt so relieved
Yeah.
when I could let that stuff fall away and just be like, I actually don't have to do that. I
It
get to
felt like
just
bondage.
see what it
Everything
is. I'm
everything
not
felt
happy
like
about it,
bondage.
but that's
Yeah.
okay, because this is just life is mountaintop, valley, mountaintop, valley, mountaintop, valley. You don't Abraham your Hicks and just feel good and like power of positive thinking through and we're seeing some crazy things go on in the world. Like there's like nuclear things going on, right? Wars and all of this stuff that's like very intense. And then you have your like individual society life where, look at even just dating in this day and age and our relationships with men. We haven't even gotten into the sexuality, the lie of this neo-feminism, where
Yeah.
being sexually liberated is to just have as many sensual experiences
Yeah.
as you want, and just
Ex-
allow all of this to come
Exactly.
into your being. And then if you
Exactly.
say anything about it that's a little more conservative, all of a sudden you're judging and condemning, and you're sending us backwards to a Puritan Victorian age. And
Exactly.
it's like, hold up. People are having a really hard time finding good partners, and people are really not happy about that. You can tell that people are not content, and there's a void with men and women,
Yeah.
so it's like the conversations, if anything, are just important to be had, and conversations that aren't necessarily fanatical, like, but they're big, like how I was 6 months ago towards how I am and how I speak about things and how I handle things now is like a different person,
It
like,
truly feels like when I even reflect on my time period when I was deep into the world that I was in, it really feels like I'm looking at another person's life. You know
hmm,
what I mean? And I think when people say like being born again, I think everyone has this assumption like, okay, you got to be baptized in water, and you got to, like there's a lot of religious aspects to see even calling yourself a Christian. But to
hmm,
me, my whole perspective of being a Christian is like I've been following this, and I've been following that, and following this person, and I'm making all of these things gods and idols, and I don't want to follow them anymore.
yeah,
I'm going to follow Jesus. I don't know where Jesus is going to take me, but I'm going to figure out, I'm going to just walk with him. I'm going to walk with him by faith. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think if you feel lost, pay attention to all the things that you've been following. Just start to look at it objectively and ask yourself, are these things actually bringing me peace?
well, and is
You
this
know?
also, and but this brings up a very big point, and this, I had to shut a conversation down because of this,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of really contradictory, ironic things about this conversation, but there's very different forms of Jesus or
Oh,
Christ. There's the New
Madison.
Age Christ consciousness.
Madison, that is something I feel like I can spend an
It's
hour.
a totally different thing, though. So
Yeah.
when we say that we
Yeah.
follow Jesus, it's not this New Age Christ consciousness where he basically was just like another ascended master that showed the potential of what you could be in the divine within. Like, it's not
Yeah.
that. It's like a personal savior that
Yeah.
you follow the example and the teachings. You go to, like, there was a sacrifice, he died on the cross, there were, like, he was raised from the dead. It's a very different Jesus. So
Yeah.
people also have to get, because that difference really matters. And that was, when I was getting into my conversation, because this other person said, oh, I'm having interactions and I'm getting direct messages from Jesus.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't think what's happening is the same thing. And I know that because nowhere in your interactions are you bringing up Christian things. It's very much a New Age Christ
Oh,
energy.
definitely. I mean, even when I was deep into the new age, this obsession with Mary Magdalene. I mean, when I say y'all obsession, I can't, because again, Madison, you and I were in a bubble. We don't
You're like
know.
Sophia Code thinking they
We
were doing
don't we don't
Tantra.
know. I don't think people really know what realm we were in. You know what I mean? Because on the external point of view, some people with the new age, all they did was tap in with a little astrology and some tarot. But I mean, I was exposed to, and Madison was exposed to just like the depths of
Occult, occult,
yeah, of this of the occult, truly the occult practice, the occult it's not
Heathenized
a religion,
sorcery is
sorcery.
what I call it now. It's
Yeah, sorcery.
sensual.
And there in that world, there's this obsession, y'all, obsession with Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ being like these lost lovers, and
My
it's everything.
counterpart.
It's, I mean, when I say like the deception of Jesus itself in that world is so deep. It's so deep that when you step, now that I'm out of it and I look at it, I'm like, wow, that is the most disrespectful, deceptive.
Well, I'm still getting in conversations about this with people where people are thinking like that's like a whole other loaded thing.
No,
But
that's definitely, I would look,
but this is what I
yeah,
want people that are hearing this conversation, like,
yeah.
you're going to have awkward conversations
Oh,
if you
yes.
start taking
Yeah.
certain stands. you're going to get called because, you know, a lot of people that still watch a lot of mainstream media, they're going to go, oh, you're going back to Christianity. Have you heard of the new Christian nationalism that's very dangerous? You know, and they're going to demonize and weaponize all these things. And you just have to kind of know what comes with the territory when you take a stand for something.
Yeah.
You're going to get questioned, you're going to get challenged, but that's
Yeah.
where you got to lean on certain things that feel anchoring, right? And people are going to look at that as what, like not a good thing, but you know, this stuff has been around forever for a reason, because it holds people to a certain sense of something that gets them through chaos.
Yeah.
And when I had that conversation where I was like, these are not the same Jesuses, and then I forwarded him just a simple, it wasn't even an article, it was more like a thesis describing the differences between the things that and he said, I don't read out, I only trust my own truth. And I think more people need to be doing that. So I'm not going to be taking in any outside resources of things or outside opinions.
Yeah.
And then I just said, well, but then I was also being accused of not being open to have a conversation, which I thought was funny because he wasn't being open to what I needed in the conversation, which was for him to get clear. And that's kind of also what has to happen. It's like, until a person gets to that point where they can kind of start getting that the differences matter.
Yeah.
The differences make a really big difference.
Definitely.
And get on your journey and go after it, because, you know, a new chapter, like I'm not professing, and I know you're not, we're not experts at this. We're not scholars. We can just sit here and we're just like little babies that are coming back to a certain faith, because there's a lot of craziness out there and it feels important.
Exactly. Because I mean, the reason why we're even titling this video, or a series of videos, I don't know how I'm going to edit this, New Age Exodus, is that when you exit out of something, right, it's like literally like you're gonna feel like you're in the desert and you don't know what to turn to or where to go. You're like, I'm thirsty, I'm tired, I'm cold, I don't know. Like there's this moment of like you start spazzing a little bit, you know what I mean? And the beautiful thing is like friendship, conversations, community, you know, like even if you don't, you know, feel like you want to go straight up and like open the Bible, I do believe in the power of going to church in the beginning when you're having that world collapse view, because there's something powerful about being amongst other people and taking you out of that isolation, you know, hiding yourself from the world and just like opening yourself up to love, you know. And I really believe that there's really some amazing people that you can meet in your local church who can even break things down for you. I mean, that was my experience when I woke up out of the occult. Like I met a friend and she invited me to a church, and you know, I remember that one Sunday I went to that church. It was like my first time going to a church in forever, and I'm just bawling my eyes out. And then after the church, we're all having these conversations, and I'm like, wow, there's so many people who are going through this exact same thing. And that's the beautiful thing about, you know, church. That's the
Not
beautiful thing
alone.
about friendship. That's the beautiful thing about community. You're not alone in your walk. You're not alone, you know?
No. And I mean, one of the things that really helped me were all those testimonies.
Yeah,
You know, and someone's
definitely.
like, oh, it's trending, and people, and it's like, no, the details of what leads people into are all the same.
Yeah.
It's all a very similar story, right? Like
It's
we
so
all, and so you're
similar.
sitting there and you're like, God, that person, like, we really just got bamboozled. Really just got so hoodwinked and duped by so many different things, right? I spent so much money that
Yeah.
I didn't have. I still work, you know, certain jobs. Like I'm not rolling in the cash.
Yeah.
And I'm blowing all my money on healing things, different
Yeah.
therapies, different, you know, and you're just looking at that, and you're not alone. There's so many people, and it's humility too. You're like, I was a dork. Some of the things I was doing, like, but I guess it's just going to give me insight, right? Now I know I
Yeah.
touched it firsthand, and now it can be like, okay, I can admit
It's so
I was
true.
wrong about so many
That's
things, and I might
that's
be wrong
it.
about things now, but you know what? There's something that does pull you,
Yeah.
and and it's a good pull. It's not this like temptation, I'm seducing you pull. It's a pull towards something that feels like it's right, it's righteous,
A
or it's
hundred
getting you on a
percent.
track.
I mean, literally the way I felt like I was pulled out of the occult.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can even describe it. It wasn't like led. It didn't
Plucking,
feel like I was
plucking
led.
you out of that high school
It felt
party.
like, whoop.
You're chugging Smirnoff raspberry, and God's like, not how my daughter is gonna go. You get home right now, young lady. We're gonna work on your obedience, like literally. And it's grace.
Grace. It really is grace. That's the best way to describe it. And
I could have wasted 4 more years doing all these things, going in circles.
oh, I
trying
mean,
to fill the God void that's
I
God
could
shaped hole.
not. It's like, it was like, I feel like it was at that point, like God pulls you at that point where you just realize, like, man, if you were to go through this again, it's going to take away years out of your life. It's literally taking years out of your life. And just like that, that's the grace of God, you know? And so, you know, if you're going through the new age exodus, join Madison and I will probably be having these conversations sporadically.
There's so much to talk about.
So if there's
layers.
a specific topic that you guys want us to explore, just put it in the comments below. If there's just like a specific topic that you want us to dive deeper in, whether that is astrology, go deeper into pick a cards, different whatever it may be, just put in the comments just so we can have an idea of what you guys are also going through as well, what things you guys might need. Just two sisters, you know, on their own walk. We're not experts, we're not teachers, but our experience, I believe that our experience we can offer that as a teaching. That's what we come to offer, just our experiences. So yeah, Madison, is there anything else you want to say to whoever is watching this or listening to this?
No, no, just that you're not alone, and you know, all the love, and God bless, because this human earth stuff is crazy. You know, and we're get like, you know, this is the age of it, maybe in Sodom and Gomorrah and Babylon, and you know, those times they didn't have the added layer of technology and all of that. What we're having in this age of information, and that discernment is like, so just also be patient with the process, because that in itself is like, just
definitely
not alone. You're not alone. So many people are feeling it, and we're all overwhelmed.
Yeah, exactly. So again, if you feel like you are having that awakening, you know, and you're not ready to open the Bible, even Madison and I might take us some time before we even start exploring the Bible with you guys, because that was very new to both her and I. I remember the first time I heard it was like, yeah, in the Bible, everything in my brain was like, what is she talking about? Bible. But I would highly recommend just going to, even if it's a non-denominational, is that how you say it?
Non-denominational
a non-denominational church. I highly recommend it, not only just for the community, but really the pastors. A lot of pastors have this gift to really just like speak to you directly with whatever you're going through. And I just know it would serve as a really great encouragement to get you out of the isolation of awakening to, you know, the deception of the new age. So we send you so much love, Madison. I'm so excited for us to continue these conversations. And
I love to talk about it.
I know.
Fascinating. Right. There's nothing weirder and like, you know, life is weird.
Life is weird.
But it's a gift. So
I love it. Oh my God, so good. Life is weird. All right, love you.